Well, guys, after 13 episodes, we end the season with a very expected time jump, but as well as a very unexpected cliffhanger that really could go anywhere from here. Hey guys, come over the season finale of Outlander, Season 2, Episode 13, Dragonfly and Amber, which is actually the title of the second book, which I think is really cool the way they did that. And the main reason I think they made this episode the title of the last book is because this is, not the last book, the title of the second book, is because this is basically the second book. What I heard this episode is basically what the entire second book is, and I was very much looking forward to this episode. Obviously, I've been loving this season, and you guys know I love this show as well, but also because it was 90 minutes, and I knew there was going to be, you know, just like the premiere, there was going to be a huge time jump, and it was also going to show us all the wrap-up and stuff in Culloden. I was really looking forward to seeing how they would be able to tie up all this stuff, if it would feel even, if it would feel like it just randomly skipped through things, and I gotta say, guys, what an amazing finale this was. I mean, this finale for me was perfect. I absolutely loved it. Yes, it was long. Yes, it was 90 minutes, but it flew by for me. I was into it the whole time. I loved everything that was going on between the time jumps and everything that happened, you know, before the Battle of Culloden. Everything was just so interesting. Caitriona Bell was, of course, amazing, but I also was very interested in seeing how the other characters would be. But let's just get into this episode because there is a ton of stuff to talking about. I'm warning you guys right now, this is going to be a very long video because we have 90 minutes of TV to talk about, and there's a lot that happened in those 90 minutes. So let's just get into it because really there's so much to talk about, and let's just, you know, jump right in because, like I said, there's tons of stuff to talk about here. Lots to unpack, and we're just going to get started with how the episode started out. So just like the season began, we start off right away with a major time jump. We're no longer in the 40s, though. We're actually in the 60s, which I thought was a really cool, different direction for the show. This is something that the show can do really well. Yes, Outlander's always been a time travel show, but it's always been in two different time periods. It's either been the 40s or in the 1700s, and I like that here they're actually utilizing a different time period, and like I said, utilizing, I think, the time travel to their advantage, because we start off actually on a Doctor Who scene of all things, so I thought it was really clever that they showed a Doctor Who scene, another time travel show, and the camera zooms out, and we see children watching it with a stately fellow at the back, and it's none other than Roger Wakefield, and we realize this is Scotland in 1968. The setting is Reverend Wakefield's manse, and of course, Reverend Wakefield, if you remember, we met in the season premiere. He was the one that was trying to jog Claire's memory and trying to help them out through this troubled time when Claire had just come back from Craignadoon and everything, and we see Fiona comes in to ask Roger to return to his guests, and Roger reluctantly leaves the room. And a tapping on the glass precedes Roger making his toast to his recently departed father. To all the guests in attendance in the back, we see Claire, a bit older, but of course she's still Claire. She's, I'd say, about 40 here, and she's drinking whiskey in the Reverend's honor. Guests are giving their condolences to Roger, but he sees a younger one wandering around. She catches his attention, and that's none other than Bree. Brianna Fraser, who, I can't think of who played her, but she really did a fantastic job, and I think they did a really good job in not making her annoying. I was worried that because of what was going to happen with her character, I was worried she was going to be annoying, but I think they did a great job in not making her annoying, because Roger keeps getting pulled over to another guest. He tries to go. He meets Brianna, and it's Bree that catches him first, we can see. And before Brianna can say her name, Claire interrupts. Roger actually doesn't remember Claire, obviously, because he was very young at the time, and he's finally introduced to Brianna. Brianna brings up her father, Frank, and as Claire has failed to mention him, it is Frank's name that jogs Roger's memory. I like that we saw that, and we realize that Claire is now a doctor, who's a surgeon to be exact, and Brianna is a history major at Harvard, and she's also 20 years old, and I thought that was very smart to do, to have her be a history major, and yeah, it is kind of convenient, because that gives Brianna a reason to do all this research and really have her understand what's going on. But it also made her a very smart character, and I really like what we got with her in this episode. And Roger, I thought, was actually really funny. There were a lot at times. It was making me laugh, and I thought he had some very good wit to him, and just the actor in general, I really think did a great job. But Roger's in the history department at Oxford, and Claire learns that Mrs. Graham has passed, but her daughter, Fiona, that's her daughter, is Fiona. She still works in the home, and Claire excuses herself to look around. Roger and Brianna make small talk, and Fiona interrupts the conversation. The music then rises as Claire wanders around, is drawn to a gun very similar to Jamie's, and it's very interesting the way we saw that. Again, very, very good, subtle stuff here with her just walking around and seeing things. I thought they did a really good job making it very subtle and kind of just her taking in everything. You know, you kind of get the sense that she's kind of gone away from this. I think Claire, you know, we know that she went to Boston. We know she went to get away from all this, and now she's being pulled back in and remembering all of the stuff that she did with Jamie and the life that they once had, so many years ago. And for her, it wasn't that long ago, because for her, it only feels like it was like 20 or 30 years ago, and really it's not that different than it was when it was with Jamie, which I think is definitely very interesting. So Roger's then saying goodbye to all his guests. Claire and Brianna are also saying goodbye, but Roger insists that they spend the night instead of driving back so late, and later that night, Claire finds herself drinking whiskey when she can't sleep, and that's understandable. Obviously, this is not the, most happiest of spots for her, and Roger joins her. He comments on the clutter. He mentions rare editions of Prince Charles Stuart and the Battle of Culloden, and he also says some of his ancestors fought and died there, and he shares that he is actually a Mackenzie, we find out, and Claire comments that she used to know quite a few of that name. Now, we kind of knew this because we know that Wakefield had said that Roger's not really his father, but he wants to be his father, kind of like that. We find out a little bit more about that in this episode, which I thought was really cool. We'll get into that. Roger asks her about saying goodbye to a loved one, but Claire admits that she's never been good at it, and Claire leaves him, and Roger asks how she finally said goodbye to the one person she loved most in all the world, and of course, I thought at first he was talking about Jamie, but then I'm like, he doesn't know who Jamie is, obviously. He's clearly talking about Frank. As we know, we realize that Frank has died. We don't know when. I like that we actually didn't know when Frank died. It just makes it that much more effective, because it doesn't exactly matter to Claire. As much as she loved Frank, she kind of started to not lose interest, but she started to not love him as much after Jamie. After leaving Jamie and everything, she didn't like Frank. She didn't love Frank as much as she did. And you kind of get the sense that she never really loved Frank the same way again, which is sad, but honestly, it's very realistic in the situation that Claire was in. And Claire looks at the full moon in the window, then back down at Brianna in bed, and she keeps saying throughout the episode, God, you're so much like him. God, you're so much like him, referring to Jamie. And we see a great scene here. The scene fades back from the back of Brianna's head to Jamie walking, and just like the premiere, there were so many cool cuts the way they did it. I love the way the show does that, and he's walking with Charles on April 16th, 1746, and Jamie tries to convince Charles to just give up now. It's not going to work now, and as we know, he did his best to prevent the Battle of Culloden, and now it's happening, and Charles compares Jamie to the Apostle Thomas, the non-believer. Jamie confirms to Claire that Culloden will be happier, it will happen today, and there's nothing they can do about it. It's going to happen, and Murtaugh confirms the English troops' movements, and Claire has an idea. We don't know what it is, but she definitely has some sort of idea. Now, what I did really like about this episode is, even though we did see the Battle of Culloden, the main focus was in 1968, which you can really tell that they're really trying to revamp the show. They're trying to do a huge, kind of like they're doing a hard reset. I think that's really cool the way they did that, and I like seeing a lot of 1968, the way they explored it, the way it got us introduced to it, and it was all in 90 minutes. Nothing felt choppy, and I feel if it wasn't 90 minutes, it would have felt choppy, but because they had that really long length and the long run time, I really think it benefited them in this episode, because it had to be long. So, back in 1968, Brianna and Roger in a car. It's kind of weird to hear 60s music in Outlander, but I think they worked really well. They travel to Fort William, and this is the same place, of course, that Jack flogged Jamie, we realize, and the platform's still there. Brianna gets the chills. Brianna asks Roger about Frank and what he remembers, and Brianna talks about how her mother lives in another world, and how she never really feels like she's there. She really feels like she's somewhere else, because, yeah, she did kind of live in another world. Literally, she did, but, of course, Brianna doesn't realize the extent of that, and she eventually realizes that as this episode goes on. And speaking of Claire, she's then in a car. She ends up in Lallybroch, and it is for sale, but it's locked up so that she cannot go inside, which really is a terrible situation for her, because this, of course, was Lallybroch, and as she sits on the stoop, she hears the voices, and I thought this was so well done. She hears the voice of Jenny, Jamie, and others, and she also sees Jamie in the archway. Of course, he's not really there, but this is what she remembers. You know, all these spots that she shared with Jamie, they mean so much more to her than, you know, anything else. And I thought that was really well done here. But basically, I thought that was definitely really cool. But back in 1746, Claire and Jamie discussed the possibility of just killing Charles. Claire actually thinks they should kill Charles. Claire shares that she gave Colm the same poison that she proposes giving Charles. And of course, as we know, you know, Colm committed suicide. And Jamie's saying that that's a crime and everything. But she's actually thinking, you know, Charles is being difficult. Charles is the one that wants this to happen. Who's to say that we can't just kill him? And we see Dougal's listening into their entire plan. This is not going to end well for anyone. But she's pretty much thinking that they should kill Charles. And back to 1968, Roger and Brianna are having a picnic. She wants to know if he remembers an incident when her mother and father were staying with the Reverend, and he said he was too young to remember much, but he does remember Mrs. Graham crying in the tool shed and everything broken, and Frank did it, and Brianna admits that he had a temper, but keeps it under wraps, and Brianna tells Rod, and we, of course, like I said, we knew that Frank, even though he, as Brianna puts it, was the nicest man ever and the kindest man you'll ever meet, he had a temper, he did, and he had kind of shades of Jack in him. I really think that all Randalls do. They just aren't as, you know, it's the extent and the things like that, and they definitely aren't as drastic as, you know, Jack was. I don't think any Randall will ever be, but Brianna tells Roger of a lockbox that Frank had that contained correspondence with the Reverend, and one letter referred to an incident, and Brianna's convinced that something big happened, definitely, and Roger says that the Reverend had journals that he wrote in every night, and she could look at them for clues. So this really starts to jumpstart things here, and I didn't think this was just exposition. Basically, the idea is that they're going to research stuff. They need to figure out more what's going on, why her mother's acting the way she did, you know, what was the life she once had, because there's clearly been a ton of stuff that Claire's not told her, and she wants to figure out what that is, and you definitely see that. So Claire goes into town to research Lallybroch. The Arches of Deed of Saison with Jamie and Claire's name and witnessed by Murtaugh, and Claire's happy to know that the home stayed in the Murray family, and the lady gives Claire a copy of it. Claire also wants to research the family of Roger Mackenzie, because she knows, obviously, that he's not really Wakefield's son, and she wants to kind of figure out what's going on there. So I thought that definitely was very interesting. So later that night, Brianna returns home from her date with Roger, as Claire puts it, and Brianna tells Claire that it wasn't really a date, you know, they're just really friends, and I like that right now, they're just friends. You get the sense that they probably are going to get there at some point, but right now they're just friends, and I definitely do like that. But something else I really loved about this episode is just seeing how different Brianna and Claire are. Now, obviously, they are from two very different generations, but Claire is from so much longer than Brianna knows, and just seeing the way Brianna talks and the way that Claire talks, you know, Outlander, there's always been this, like, lavish, classy type of dialogue, and just hearing Brianna speak, she just speaks like you and I do, and I think that was really cool to see. The first actual American character in Outlander, I thought was really well done. I never actually thought there'd be one, and I think it was really awesome the way they did that, because Outlander in general, if you guys know, it's not really an American show. Even though it's, you know, the book is from an American, the show's, you know, not really an American show. Even though Ron Moore's an American, the show in general, most of the cast is British or Scottish or Irish or something like that. I think the girl who plays Brianna really is the first American on the show, and I think that's really cool the way we saw that, and you can kind of tell that Brianna doesn't fully understand Claire, and Claire doesn't really understand Brianna either, and Claire tells Brianna that she just puttered around the village. Brianna asks Claire if she misses Frank or ever loved him, because she acts like she doesn't, and Claire's saying that she does, which I think she did at a time, but right after Jamie, I don't really think Claire loved him in the same way. Like I said, I think it was just really hard for Claire to put away Jamie. I mean, that was Jamie was someone that she never wanted to fall in love with, but she did, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but back to 1746, Claire and Jamie continue to discuss poisoning Charles, only this time, Dougal's listening, and Dougal walks in and voices displeasure at what he just heard, and he says that they are filthy, whoring witches, because obviously Dougal's really pissed at what's going on, and again, I love that Dougal doesn't really side with Jamie and Claire. We've kind of gotten that all season, that Dougal's always been, the entire show we've gotten that, but we've always gotten the sense that Dougal's been on the other side of the law when it comes to Jamie. You know, he's always been kind of against him, and you definitely do see that here. So back to 1968, Brianna and Roger are at Oxford, and Roger leaves Brianna on her own while he does some work, and she happens upon a group of students listening to a woman talk about Scottish independence, and it's none other than Gillian Edgers, but Gillian Edgers is not just Gillian Edgers, this is Gayless. Gayless is back in the show, but she's Gillian Edgers, and it makes perfect sense, because as we know, Gayless is from the 60s. She is, in fact, from the 60s, and we know that she was actually a time traveler, and this is basically pre-time traveling, we get the sense. And after her speech, Brianna confronts her on some history and introduces herself, and shortly thereafter, Roger also gets introduced to Gillian, and Roger and Brianna take a pamphlet from Gillian. It's a very interesting scene, you know, the way she's talking about Bonnie Prince Charlie. I mean, you can tell this is just so passionate to her, and it's because she lived there. That's why this is such a big deal to her. You know, this isn't just, you know, researching stuff. She lived there, and it's a really big deal to her because of that. So Claire's found her way to Culloden. She looks upon a mannequin of Prince Charles, and she's not really impressed. And I thought this was a really great scene. The way that she thinks everyone's kind of made Prince Charles to be a hero, when we've seen throughout the show that he definitely was not a hero, and her attention's caught by a couple describing an item in a case, and it's the Dragonfly and Amber that Hugh Monroe gave to her as a wedding present, which I think is extremely interesting, and I really love that we saw that. So back into 1746, we see the conversation between Dougal and Claire and Jamie escalates. Now, I kind of saw what was going to happen here, but I still can't believe they actually did it. Dougal calls Jamie a traitor and betrayer of trust. He's clearly beside himself. Dougal draws his sword. He goes after Jamie. Jamie tries to protect Claire. Dougal cuts Jamie's hand a few times. I mean, this is a full-on fight here, and with Dougal having an upper hand, Claire breaks a crate on his head. Dougal falls. Jamie's on top of him. When Jamie's still pointing his dirk at Jamie, Jamie uses his hand on the blade to turn the dirk around, and you can tell he doesn't really know if he wants to do it, but Claire kind of encourages him and actually says, no, do it. And it's now pointed at Dougal's stomach. A struggle ensues. Claire steps in to help Jamie push the dirk into Dougal, and they kill Dougal. Dougal's dead, and you know what? I like this. I think it was honestly time for Dougal to die, and if there was anything I could really think about dying in this finale, I thought it was going to be Dougal. Just the way that Dougal's been acting, and especially after what just happened with Column, it didn't seem like Dougal was going to have much more to do in the show, and Dougal's dead, and the look on Jamie's face is not one of triumphance and just victory, it's more of sorrow. I mean, he can't believe what he just did, that he actually just killed his own brother, but he did, and Claire's upset as well that he did the same thing, and he just can't believe that he did this. Excuse me, not brother, cousin, I believe the Dougal's his cousin, I can't really remember, but, it's been so long, basically, they reference it all the time, I just can't really think right now, but, Claire's obviously really upset as well, and that's insane, they killed Dougal. But back to 1968, Brianna and Roger go into the attic, and they're searching for the Reverend's journal. It's very dusty and cluttered, we see, and she finds the journals, but also feels this rat around her legs, and Roger brings up a rat satire, song that's sung to the rats to encourage them to leave and go elsewhere where there's food. By the way, I forgot to say, that these two have fantastic chemistry. Like, they really work great together. I think just as good as Jamie and Claire's chemistry, which is something that they definitely were trying to echo here. The way that Jamie and Claire are kind of like Brianna and Roger. I think we definitely did see that here. So Roger demonstrates one for Brianna. Roger then and he actually sings for her. It's pretty funny. Roger spies this old toy plane in the attic, and Brianna spies a box with Randall on it, and in it she sees photos of her parents and documents about Blackjack Randall, and they take the boxes back to the library of the manse, and back to 1746, Rupert walks in on Dougal dead on the floor, Jamie kneeling above him with the dirk still in his hand, and Rupert preps his dirk, is shocked about what he's seeing, and I was like, they're not going to kill Rupert, right? No, there's no way they're going to do that, but I also thought maybe they will, because Diana Gabaldon said that he was supposed to die in episode 11, but they didn't do that because Angus had already died, so I was really wondering were they actually going to kill him off, but Rupert goes to leave to tell others, but Jamie stops him, and he says he wants 2 hours before Rupert tells anyone. He promises to return and answer for what he has done, and Rupert agrees. So I'm kind of wondering, is Rupert going to be the one to kill Jamie? Because as we know, Jamie's supposed to die in this episode. And just knowing that that's going to happen, I was thinking, okay, Rupert might actually end up killing him for what he did. Because what he did is kind of unforgivable. I mean, especially someone like Dougal, who he was allied with all his life. And who was always, even though Dougal was never really on Jamie's side, Jamie never, thought of doing something as killing him. We always saw Jamie as the hero. But that is something that's not really a hero thing to do, and I think we definitely do see that. And I thought that was definitely very interesting, the way that was done and everything. But, you know, he was part of Clan Mackenzie, and he killed Dougal. He's been allied with them all along, and I was really wondering if this is how Jamie was going to die. But back to 1968, we hear Claire remembering Frank's voice describing the Battle of Culloden, which is from the first episode, which is really interesting. She walks the moor toward the Clan Fraser grave marker, and a woman is there and asks Claire if she is a Fraser, and she says she is, because in her heart, she is a Fraser. Even though her name legally is Claire Randall, she remembers herself as Claire Beauchamp Fraser. That is who she remembers herself as, and basically the woman leaves. Claire's left alone at the marker, and I think that's the other reason why Claire doesn't really think of Frank in the same way. After seeing what Jack did, I think she just couldn't look at Frank the same way. I think that's also one of the reasons. But she begins to speak to Jamie and says she won't cry. She tells Jamie about Brianna and finally says goodbye to Jamie, saying that, you know, when they left at Craignadoon, there was one thing she never said, and she says goodbye. This is it. She's putting an end to it, and she's realizing that she needs to move on. You know, she's thinking, okay, Jamie's dead. She needs to move on. And it's really interesting the way this was done, definitely. A lot of this episode did kind of feel like a series finale, and I like the way they did that up until the ending, which we'll get into. But Brianna and Roger, they're again going through the documents they found in the attic. Brianna happens upon newspaper clippings with photos of Claire in the headline, "Kidnapped by the Fairies," and she realizes that Claire was gone for 3 years, and she continues to look for clues, and this is really when big stuff starts here. I mean, like I said, there was a lot of stuff going on here, but a lot of it was looking through evidence, and finally, this is when the real confrontation starts. We see Claire's pouring tea as Brianna comes down the stairs, papers in hand, and really upset, because Brianna basically thinks that because of the fact that she was kidnapped for 3 years, she thinks that she had an affair, which, of course, Frank thought of as well. You know, he kind of thought that happened, but he also knew that Claire just wouldn't leave him. However, Brianna never really knew the relationship they had, and the way that Claire talks about Frank is not the same way she talks about Jamie, and Claire's distraught that Brianna's figured this out, but at the same time, it gives her the opportunity she feels to finally come clean. You know, while she's upset, she feels, okay, this is great, I can finally tell Brianna about Jamie. Unfortunately, this involves a whole time travel element, and that's way too much for Brianna to handle and also believe. And Roger walks in the conversation. Brianna insists that he stays, so he hears all of it as well. Brianna also learns that he's dead, and the reason for her being in the dark all this time is because Frank insisted on it. And as we know, you know, Frank said to never tell her about what's going on, but Claire feels that she needs to know, because now she knows, you know, there really is no not telling her. You know, she said that she promised Frank that she wouldn't tell her about him for 20 years. You know, she hasn't uttered his name out loud, but now she knows she needs to tell him, about her real father. And then we go right back to 1746, where Jamie and Claire tell Murtaugh that Jamie killed Dougal, and I love that Murtaugh's like, finally, you actually did it. I thought that was actually pretty funny that Murtaugh was okay with it, but again, Murtaugh has been one of the best parts of the season. He's been really funny, and he's always been on their side. I've said it before. Murtaugh is probably the most loyal to Jamie. Like, if I could really think of the most loyal man, it would be Murtaugh. Because Murtaugh, you know, if you tell him that you did something, all right, you finally did it. It's awesome. I love that Murtaugh was approving of it. And Fergus is nearby, who I don't think had a single line in this episode, believe it or not. But he hears the conversation. Murtaugh's not surprised. Jamie pulls out a deed of Cézanne for Lallybroch for Claire and himself to sign, and it transfers ownership to Jamie's nephew, and it is predated to 1 year before Jamie became a traitor to the crown. And Fergus is employed with taking the paper back to Lallybroch, and back to 1968, Brianna does not believe Claire at all about her 18th century tale, and I like this, you know, even, you know, she, unlike Frank, she doesn't believe her at all. You know, she thinks this is all bullshit, and that she's really just trying to cover up that she had an affair, and it really does show the difference between Frank and Brianna. You know, Frank knew Claire all these years and knew that his wife would never do this to him, and that she was loyal, and that she loved him, that she would not leave him by choice. Brianna, on the other hand, has never really known her mother, because her mother's always kind of been in her own world. She's always been thinking back to the life she could have had with Jamie, and that she had to leave him, and you kind of understand why, obviously. I mean, the situation that Claire was in. Claire then tries to convince Brianna by showing her the copy of the deed to Lallybroch with her and Jamie's signatures on them. Brianna's still not having it, though, and it all ends with Claire admitting angrily that Jamie was the love of her life, and she has tears in her eyes at this admission. She wishes Claire was dead instead of Frank. Literally says she wishes she was dead, and Back to 1746, we see the deed is signed. Jamie gives Fergus a dirk and the deed to take to Jenny and Ian. Jamie and Claire then say goodbye. Murtaugh gives Fergus a short bow. He leaves the camp, and they're basically all ready to fight at this point. So back to 1968, Roger and Brianna are at a pub discussing what Claire has said, and Brianna she feels it's horseshit. She feels that there's no way this is true. Brianna keeps making excuses as to how Claire could be lying about this. Roger tries to push Brianna into understanding her mother. He feels that there could be something she's at. She could have something here, that maybe she's not lying to her. He doesn't feel that her own mother would lie to her about this. And I like that Roger's actually on Claire's side the whole time, that he's really not on Brianna's side. Now, does he 100% believe her? No, but he's definitely more towards believing her than Brianna is. And you can understand why Brianna is someone, who needs factual proof. She needs factual evidence. She needs to make sure, she doesn't believe in anything that's not in the history books. If it's not in the history books, she's not going to believe it, and that's how Brianna is. So I thought that was definitely very interesting. Claire then picks up the old newspaper clippings of her incident, and below them is Gillian Edger's pamphlet, and it's Gayless staring Claire right in the face, right on that piece of paper. Claire remembers the year that Gayless told her in 1968, the year she came through the stones, and realizes that, oh shit, she's gonna go through at some point. You need to warn her before she does, and I love that even though Gayless was in this entire season, she was in this last episode. I think it was actually very fitting the way they did that. And Claire then ventures to Gillian's house, and she's not there, but her drunkard husband Greg is, and he tells her that Gillian has not been home in a while because of her work for the cause. He falls asleep, and you get the sense that he's not really that great of a husband to her, and even though he says that he loves her, Claire opens one of Gillian's notebooks, sees a drawing of the stones, and Claire takes the notebooks with her as she leaves because she knows that definitely there's something going on there. She wants to figure out what's going on with that. And Gillian then runs into Roger and Brianna at the pub. She's sorry that they missed a great rally. She tells them that she's leaving town that night to further the cause. And Claire had said before that she didn't know where, Gillian was, but she wanted to warn her what was going to happen. And she's poring over Gillian's notebooks filled with notes on the science and folklore of time travel and traveling through stones. And Claire has to try to stop her and warn her of her fates in Cransmere. And the scene where she talks to Brianna is really interesting because I don't know if we're supposed to get the sense that this is what happened to Gayless after she was burned at the pyre, but that's kind of what I got from this. I kind of got the sense that after Gayless was burned at the pyre, that she then went back and she somehow got back. I don't know how she got back, but I kind of got the sense, but I don't think that's what happened, but I kind of got the sense that's what happened there, because the way she talks to Brianna, she tells her that she needs to believe, and she needs to she needs to believe what she hears, and I thought that was definitely very interesting that we saw that. And back to 1746, Jamie instructs Murtaugh to lead the Fraser-Lallybrock men to safety once they are on their way to battle. Jamie knows it is a battle that they won't succeed and that he does not want his men dying during it. He knows that they're not going to win, and he wants to make sure that they don't die. And Jamie's going to take Claire to safety and then return the battle to fight. Murtaugh agrees to guide his men to safety and the path home, but he's coming back to fight alongside Jamie. Jamie promised that they have been gearing up for this war for so many days now, and they've been training for it for so many weeks that he's going to fight alongside him. Even though Dougal, that was what he was meant to do, he's going to be the one to fight alongside him. He's his most loyal man, and I think it just really shows how loyal Murtaugh will always be, and I really did love seeing that. I love, like I said, the expansion of all the stuff they gave Murtaugh to do this season. You really did feel that Murtaugh, it wasn't just Claire and Jamie this season, it was Claire, Jamie, Murtaugh, and you definitely saw that here. So back to 1968, Brianna returns back to her bedroom in Claire, and she still doesn't believe anything about the time travel, but she does believe that she had a birth father that is not Frank, and she wants to know more about Jamie. Claire tells her more about him, and Caitriona Bell in the scene, just, oh my god, she really was incredible, and I love what she said here, that she says that she didn't intend to fall in love, that she fought against it, but she couldn't deny what she felt for him. She tried, but she couldn't. It was the most powerful thing that she ever felt in her life, and that really is true. If you remember in the very beginning of the show, in season 1, their marriage was an arranged marriage. They got married so that way she didn't have to marry Jack Randall. If you remember, Jack wanted to be the one to marry her, and also that way that Jamie wouldn't keep getting hurt, because Jamie couldn't get hurt if he was married to Claire. So, basically that's how that whole situation, well, I think that's something like that, definitely. I can't exactly remember, but it was something like that, and I thought that overall, I really did love seeing that. I love that we now, I love that she said that, because she never really did intend to love Jamie, but she just did. She loved everything about him. She loved his innocence. She loved how much he was in love with her, so much that she fell in love with him. That's kind of how I saw it. Those two were just meant for each other, and she never really understood that until she met him, and I think that really was incredible. Love the way that was done. So Claire then knocks on the door of where Roger is poring over letters and notes. She came to get Gillian's pamphlets, and Roger asks how it's going with Brianna. Claire asks about Roger, about Jillian, and Brianna interrupts with details on Jillian. Claire wants to find her, and Brianna and Roger tell her that she was planning on leaving town that night, and Claire missed to tell them that Jillian is in fact Gayless from the witch trials. As she's going through the stones that night, she has to try and stop her, but Gayless, we find out something really big here about Roger. Of course, Claire knew that Roger was obviously not, he was definitely not, Wakefield's son. She knew that for a fact, but she didn't know who he was until she really put together that, as we know, Gayless and Dougal had a child, and Gayless, of course, as we know, is from the year 1968. Roger is, in fact, Gayless's son, and that's how she gets him involved in here. She's staying right next to her. What will happen if Gayless does not go through the stones? Will Roger disappear? Roger agrees to go with Claire, at least to try to warn Gayless, or at least have Claire admit that she is a tad crazy about all this time-traveling thing, and Brianna reluctantly agrees to go along, even though she doesn't really believe that this can actually happen, that people can't travel through stones, and really, I don't, disagree with Brianna. It really is a lot to handle. I mean, if I just came up to you and told you, hey, I can travel through stones, it's pretty crazy. It really is. I mean, it's really a lot to take in and a lot of extensive research, definitely. It's not really something that you just hear every day, that, hey, I can travel through stones. It's just not something you really hear about. So I can totally understand, Brianna's skepticism over this. I can understand why she doesn't really believe Claire when she says this. So, back 1746, Jamie leads Claire away from the soldiers. He's taking her to safety, but she insists they go away together. However, Jamie is wanted, and he would much rather die on the field than in a noose. And he pretty much feels that he's going to die, and Claire wants to stay with him and argues that he did not leave her at the witch trials. Why would he leave her now? Because, yeah, that's true. And Jamie says that it's because she's pregnant and tells her right off the bat, and we knew this, that she was pregnant, but he finally tells her she's pregnant, and Jamie's kept track of her courses and knows that she's with child. Jane brings up the promises that she's made to go back to Frank if he were to die, and it's just an incredible scene that he knows, she's going to go back to Frank. And even though we knew that this happens in the first scene, just seeing it unfold all before our eyes and everything that's happened this season, it really was really heartbreaking. We'll get to that scene a little bit, because that by far is one of the big highlights, I think, this entire season, is the scene we get before that. But definitely, I thought that was definitely very interesting. But I love this was intercuts with 1968. We see Gayless has killed her husband at Craignadoon, which, that's insane, but she literally killed her husband, probably because she poured gasoline on him, lights him on fire, and Claire, Roger, and Brianna arrive after the fire has started. Now, this is totally something that Gayless would do. Of course, we know how sneaky Gayless was. We know she was a witch. I could totally see her doing this, but they rush up the hill, but get there just at the moment Gayless goes through the stones. They see it, and they see it right before their eyes, and this finally gets Brianna to believe that it actually happened. Roger, Claire, and Brianna hear the buzzing of the stones. Roger's a bit more affected by the sound, and I think it's because he is, of course, a descendant of Gayless and everything, and his eyes are watering. He stumbles. Claire tells him to go find help, and it's incredible the way that was done. Absolutely love that. Just seeing them go from optimistic to full-on believing, I thought was real, and especially with Brianna, seeing her very skeptic to actually seeing her, seeing what's going on before her eyes, thought was awesome. But then we get to what is by far the most emotional scene in this episode. I mean, like I said, I knew that. Here's what we know in the beginning of the season. Jamie dies. Claire somehow ends up, back in 1948. That's all stuff we knew in the beginning of the season. But just seeing it, happen before our eyes, seeing Jamie have to tell Claire she has to leave, I don't think they could have done this scene better. Jamie and Claire arrive at Craignadoon. Claire lets go of his hand. She does not know how well she will explain all this once she goes back. She hears the buzzing of the stones, and she begs him to go through the stones with her. He doesn't hear the buzzing, and it's because he's not from her time. He touched the stone to prove his point. His destiny lies a Culloden more, and even if he was to go back with her, this is his destiny. He needs to fight Culloden. He's been the one to train all these men, and if he doesn't go back with her, he's letting them all down. They're all just gonna die. And Claire gives him back the Dragonfly and Amber to hold on to, and I was crying at this point, honestly. Not before they have sex one last... Well, they start to have sex one last time, but they actually don't, and the battle's begun. They can hear the cannons in the background. Jamie gives Claire his father's ring for Baron to have when he's old enough, and Claire promises to name him Brian after his father, which of course she did. Brianna, that's why she did that. And Jamie turns around, walks her backwards to the stone. They say, "I love you" once more. Then Claire turns around to face the stone. He takes her hand, presses it to the stone as he says, "Goodbye, Claire." And as we know, she did not get to say goodbye to him. And now it makes sense as to why the first episode started out the way it did. Because while Claire thought she could, she didn't actually think she'd go back. She didn't. And I love that Claire, it's not just that, how can I go back? It's not her saying, how is it possible? It's her saying, after all I've done, how am I going to get anyone to believe this? Because she really doesn't think she can get anyone to believe that. She knows they'll think she's crazy. And it really just shows how smart Claire is. She knows that if she says anything, she'll probably be thrown like in a insane asylum or something. I mean, again, it's not every day you hear someone say you can travel through stones. And Jamie says that when he stands before God, he'll have one thing to say to weigh against all the rest. Lord, give him a rare woman. God, he loved her well. It's an incredible scene. Love the way that was done. I think it was a perfect just ending scene between Jamie and Claire. And again, this might be the last time we ever see Jamie and Claire. We think until we get this incredible last scene where back in 1968, Brianna now believes everything. She now sees that it all happened, and she doesn't understand it, but she believes it. And it kind of reminded me of the Santa Claus, I'm not gonna lie. That's the one thing I can compare this to, is the Santa Claus movie with Tim Allen, where they didn't know what was going on at the end. They didn't really understand it, but she believed it. And I can understand if someone thought it was kind of cheesy, but I thought it was just something really beautiful about it. The fact that she now has this relation with her mother, and realized that her mom has never lied to her. Claire's elated to hear that Brianna believes her. Brianna makes her promise that there will be no more lies between them, and she agrees, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of the bond between these two. But then we get to the last scene of this episode, which is just incredible. I love seeing that. We see Roger returns to the stones, and as soon as he returns, Brianna asks him to tell Claire what he has found. It's a letter from the Reverend about research for Frank, but it may have never been sent to Frank. But just the letter, there's a lot that he says here, but basically the idea is that we see that there were 5 men that, a bunch of people died at Culloden, but there were 5 men that escaped, and death at Culloden, but they also escaped execution. And realizes that one of those men is none other than Jamie Fraser, which means that Jamie, in fact, didn't die. He is in fact alive. And Claire realized that Jamie lived, and says if that's true, she has to go back. And you see Brianna just looking in disbelief, not really knowing what's going to happen now. Claire realizing that she has to go back. Her entire face just lights up, knowing that she can go back to the life she wanted. And that is how this season ends. What a perfect ending. I love the way that played out. I thought it was just incredible to watch, and it's just amazing stuff. And I love that we ended with 60s music, just making us realize that we're in the 60s for now, and we don't really know what's going to happen. I absolutely thought that was awesome. But let's get more into this and just talk about where I think we're headed next season. Honestly, I have no idea where we're headed next season, because really, this is a very difficult choice here. Yes, Claire, we've seen, she truly does belong in the 1700s, but is she going to take Brianna with her? Is she going to take Roger with her? I mean, yes, Roger is Gaelus's, son, and Brianna is Jamie's daughter, but is she going to have to relive anything? And who even knows if she's going to if Jamie's even going to remember Claire if she goes back? That's something that I'm really wondering, is if she goes back, where is she going to go back to? Does she immediately go back to where this all started, or does this take her to where she wants to go? Because I don't really know. We still don't exactly know the way the stones work. We just know there's a buzzing sound. If you go through it, then, you go back to the 1700s, and that's something that I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how that plays out, and if Brianna's going to go with her, because I'm assuming that Brianna's going to go with her, but I don't really know the way that that's going to play out. But there's also the fact that Brianna, she's in college, and she has this whole life ahead of her, and so does Roger. And does she really want her daughter and her daughter's potential love interest to give up their entire lives for this? I mean, it really is a hard choice, and I'm looking forward to seeing the way that that's all going to play out, as well as Gaelus. Here's what I'm thinking. If Claire does go back, I think her main purpose next season is obviously reunite with Jamie, but it's also going to be to save Gaelus. I think she's really going to try to change things so that way Gaelus doesn't get burned at the pyre. I feel like there's got to be a way to change things or something like that. Again, I don't read the books for a reason, guys. I don't want to know what ends up happening. So if you guys know what happens with that, please don't tell me, because I don't, like I told you guys, I don't read the books for a reason, and that's one of the reasons why I don't read the books. But overall, guys, that's really all I can say for, speculation on next season, because there's a lot of uncertainty. Are they going to go back? Are we going to start out next season? I mean, we could start out next season. They could already be back in the 1700s. Or are we going to start off directly from here? I mean, I think they did a really great job, and especially because Outlander was renewed for 2 more seasons, we know that there's a lot more uncertainty. There's a lot more they can do. There's a lot more places they can go, and I absolutely love that. And they already said that season 3 is going to come quicker, which I'm very happy about. I know a lot of people are disappointed with this season. I wasn't, because, again, I haven't read the books. Now, most of what we got in this episode, that's the first half of the book. I heard throughout the book constantly, we go to the 960s, then we go to the 1700s, and a lot of people are disappointed by that. I thought it was really cool the way they did here. I think it was a lot less confusing. I think there was a lot more backstory, and we cared a lot more when Frank died. When we realized that Frank died, I think we cared a lot more because we really did see what he did for Claire and how much he tried to get her away from this and how he wanted her to go to Boston and venture out and try to get her to have this whole life, but she could never have that life because after she came back, she didn't belong in our world anymore. I just thought that was overall really interesting. Love the way that was done, and especially seeing the 60s. It was a nice welcome change. I was a bit worried on how is Outlander going to be in the 60s, a time period we've never seen before, but it worked really, really well, I have to say. I think, the way they used the 60s music and contrasted to the stuff in the 1700s was really well done. Absolutely love that. And for me, this is right up there with episode 7. For me, those are my 2 favorite episodes of the season. I absolutely love the season. I think this was an incredible season overall. Now, I will say, like I said, I do think it's sort of... The first half I thought was a lot better. I definitely will say that. I liked the first half of the season a lot more than the second half of the season. When you got into the war stuff, I thought it was really well done, but it did kind of feel a bit just quick direction for it to go, because it focused a lot more on the war and everything, and we didn't even see the battle plot and play out here. And I think the point of that was because there was no reason to. We know that Jamie lived. We know exactly what happened, and of course, you can look up what happened in the battle plot. And I think the fact that we saw Brianna and Roger doing all this research, there was no reason to go back there. There's absolutely no reason to go back to the battle plot, and I like that we actually did not see the final battle play out. But overall, guys, I really did love the season of Outlander. I thought this season really was incredible. There were so many great things about it. Just between them going to France, from them starting out back in the 1940s, and then seeing everything play out from France, and then going back to Scotland, which did kind of feel just like a weird reset that they did, but I think it worked really well. And even though, like I said, there were some things I didn't love about the season, at the end of the day, I'm still going to give Outlander Season 2 a 5 out of 5 or an A+. This season for me was pretty perfect. I mean, I think this was honestly better than last season. There were so many great things about this season, just between seeing the relationship between Jamie and Claire, and seeing everything that went down with about Claude, and seeing them try to prevent it and doing whatever they could to do that. And also, I think, furthering the secondary characters. I think some of the characters we were introduced to here, like, say, Mary, say, Master Raymond, going all the way back to the beginning of the season where we had Master Raymond, and, we had Fergus, and we had all those characters, were so much more interesting than the Season 1 characters, and I like that we did more with some of those characters, like Murtaugh and with Dougal. They just became a lot more interesting this season, and I really think that helped make us more interested in what was going on, and also, getting a little more risky, focusing on the 60s and the 40s as well. I thought was really well done. Absolutely love that, and it really, I think, just made this season feel really complete, and especially in these last 90 minutes, really just felt like the complete story overall, and I absolutely love that. But overall, guys, that's it. Outlander Season 2 is now over, and now we are heading for Season 3, and I'm really looking forward to Season 3. I think Season 3, though, is going to come a little bit earlier, and I'll tell you guys why. Outlander, Starz recently announced that most of their shows, or all of their shows, are going to go to Sundays, and Outlander, I think they don't want to compete with Game of Thrones, so I'm thinking they're going to come back in January is what I'm thinking. I think it's probably the best time for them to come back, January for me. That's when I'm thinking the show is going to come back, is January at the latest. I don't know when else, but January I think is most likely when they're going to come back. Either way, we'll have to see what happens there, but overall, guys, let me know what you guys thought of this incredible finale. I know this was a very long video, but hey, it was a 90-minute episode. Did you really expect this video to be short? No, you guys know I talk very in-depth, and Thank you guys for watching my reviews all season. I can't wait for next season. I'm happy to say there is next season. I was a bit worried that they weren't going to get renewed, honestly. I don't know what was wrong with me. I just had this fear that they weren't going to get renewed, and luckily they have not one, but 2 more seasons, and we'll have to see the way that plays out. But let me know what you guys thought of this season and this season finale in general. Where do you think they're heading Season 3? I think we're going in a much different direction Season 3, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the way that plays out. But I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for Episode 5 of Outcast, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.